Patrick's screen.
Oh, I guess we'll just stop his share. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, you just love technology, right? Okay, we'll see, whoops, we'll see what we've got. I was set up. Let's see what we've got here now. Oh, no, wrong one. There. Okay, welcome. This is our fourth and last webinar. My name's Louise Oslin. So I'm just going to do a little bit of introduction. Some of you may have seen this a few times already, so please bear with me. Oops, so I'm going to do a welcome, the land acknowledgement. I'm going to bring some messages from Alberta Education. I'll introduce Patrick and talk about the format. So today, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Nations, which include the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Dakota First Nations and the traditional homeland of the Métis and all of the peoples who have made their home in the treaty regions of southern Alberta. And as this is a webinar, we have participants from across Alberta. We would like to further acknowledge that participants are joining us from other treaty areas. Oh, okay. Back up. So taking a look, we've got 316 different journeys that have been going over the last 8 years, starting with those first steps into moving forward with high school redesign. Every one of them has looked a little bit different. Every journey has started from a place within the context of the school. The Alberta Ed would like to recognize the work of high school leaders and teachers across the province, as their commitment to high school redesign and high school completion has resulted in many positive practices at the school and jurisdictional level. And it has led to quality teaching, student engagement, and improved student achievement. Schools have been involved in the implementation of the high school redesign, have informed changes to this year's Guide to Education. You look on pages 51 and 52, you can see some of those changes. And they have positively impacted the culture of high school by operationalizing more student-centered approaches at the high school level. We know one size doesn't fit all. And so we know that all the differences that have impacted the school efforts for change have resulted in different stages that schools have gone through. And they've implemented strategies and foundational practices looking either with the lens of culture, pedagogy, structure, or leadership. Whoops. Okay. The foundational principles, these were the ones that we all started with back 8 years ago. And what I like, or what I think is so positive about them, is if we look at these foundational principles, mastery learning, personalization, today the focus is going to be assessment. We've had a focus on meaningful relationships and welcome and caring and respectful, safe environments when we looked at mental health. We looked at mastery learning, personalization, flexible learning environments, I think more when we looked at the quarter system. Last week it was around teacher efficacy, so the educator roles and professional development, and then once again, assessment. And what Alberta Ed has found with their gathering of data, that many of these, or all of these, are well entrenched in different schools at different levels. And so they become a focus at one time, and then at another time, because of a school's context, there's another focus. Just a reminder to let you know that we have updated the Moving Forward with High School Redesign website, and all of the past webinars, the other 3, the recordings have been uploaded, and this one should be uploaded by tomorrow morning. And there are lots of resources between this website and Alberta Ed website to support your learning. If this is your first one, you can see what the other topics were and the dates. So we looked at quarter system, mental health, efficacy and implementation, and this last one in terms of reassessment in high school to foster growth mindset. So we have Patrick Sproul from the Calgary Catholic School District. He will tell you a little bit more about himself and what his journey has been like. And before I turn it over to him, I'm just going to do a little plug for the surveys that you'll be getting in terms of feedback from the session, and the consortiums really value your feedback because it gives them more information in terms of the best resources and supports they can provide teachers and leaders in our school. So please fill out that survey, maybe before the long weekends, because otherwise you might forget. And right now, just think about it. Take a deep breath. Why are you here? You've had a busy day, but something in that write-up attracted you to come to this survey. To this assessment session. So I'm going to stop talking right now. I'm going to stop sharing, and we are going to turn this over to Patrick.
Thank you, Louise. I'm just going to share my screen right now. Hope everybody can see that now. First of all, I want to start out. I'm not an expert on this, on reassessment and assessment. But we're sure working hard at becoming that, and I'm getting a lot of help from some people along the way that I do want to give kind of credit to helping me, and this is within the Calgary Catholic School District. So the Director of Instructional Services, Helmut Kaiser, he's been really good, along with my supervisor in charge of math, Randy Smith, Daniel Denis, an area director who started this process a long time ago with Calgary Catholic, my principal, Frank Durante, and my vice principal, Ben Grattan, who is actually our scheduler. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what they did and how they've impacted. So you can see there's 6 books here. Have I read them all? No, not at all. But excerpts from each of these books have been helpful to me with my growth in this. And I was just talking to Louise earlier. I've been teaching for 20 years, and about 5 years ago, that's when I actually had kind of my aha moment on assessment and reassessment. And you're going to see in this presentation just how stagnant we were at my school and somewhat in our district to where we are now at my school. We're not perfect. We're getting there. But just I want to show you where we came from. All right, our failures, what we did wrong, our misconceptions, to what we're trying to do now. And if anything jumps out at you, please ask a question. I hope I have the answer for you. If not, well, hopefully we somehow as a team can get that for you. So Louise did do the territorial acknowledgement and the welcome. So we're going to look at a little bit in growth mindset, assessment, and the feedback loop. And then the bulk of the presentation is me talking about our high school's assessment journey. To give you a heads up though, I am a math teacher. And so I'm going to be giving you the most examples from a math perspective. However, I do believe that this can translate hopefully to all grades and all subjects in some way, somehow. Some things I might do may not fully work in, let's say, an English class or a grade 4 religion class or a grade 5 phys ed class. We'll see, okay? So I'm gonna ask Dave now I've had trouble with this slide. Dave is gonna take over and just play a quick little 2-minute video. Mr. D, some of you may have seen it. So Dave, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen.
And now a sneak peek at the new comedy series, Mr. D.
There goes your weekend, eh, Larkin?
Not really. Let me explain how this works. If these were regular tests, what I would do is I would find the smartest students, Maya, and I would mark hers first.
Right.
Then I'd use that as my answer key. But these are essay questions. Now, if I were to read these, it would take forever. So I don't. So I look at their mark going into it. Okay, like Maya, where's Maya? Has the highest mark in the class. There she is. So that's my answer key.
Don't you already know the answers?
Sometimes theirs are better. I gotta give her a good mark, a couple circles, and then sometimes too vague, too vague.
Right.
That way I don't have to give her 100.
Yeah.
They only look
Keep
at
it
the mark.
realistic.
96. I give her a little more than she has going in. That way she won't come back and
Right.
challenge me. Okay?
It's a good
Come on.
system.
Jimmy, look at Jimmy. Nothing.
Right, it's got nothing.
Garbage. Waste of time. 33, there's some words there, but I have no time to read them. So then I get angry. Jimmy, ridiculous. This
Right.
has got to stop.
He could say the same thing to you.
Okay, you got the system?
Yeah, it's a good system, buddy.
You do those ones.
You want me to mark them?
You don't really mark, you just
All right.
put marks on it, and you put a circle, you circle a
That seems
number.
good. I'm a forger.
Okay, here's Mike. Now, Mike, he's got a 62.
You should give him an 80.
Give him
That'll
an
make
80.
his day.
Make his day.
Right.
Okay. And he goes home, his parents are excited. I like that. Finally.
Like you've been rooting for him the whole time.
Yeah, about
Right.
time. Thank
That's
you.
good.
This person, Shauna, I don't like her. Drives me nuts.
Right.
So what I do is I fail her on the exam, but I just give her enough to pass the course, so I don't have to teach her again. So it's like a lot of check marks, some question marks, underline some things, couple good comments.
Mediocre.
I haven't used that one. That's a good one. Happy face, smile.
That's disturbing.
You are almost a teacher.
Mr. D, Monday starting Jack.
Did you know Kellogg's has many cereal?
Thanks, Ken. Sorry, I called you Dave there. I apologize for that. Anyway, so just a nice little, video to see. Maybe you laughed a little bit there. Maybe you've seen it before, but, assessment and feedback. Are we doing it right? Obviously, Mr. D there is clearly not marking it correct. Just to kind of get us started and relaxed and so on in this procedure. So some of the slides you're going to see, like my next one, is some questions I'd like you to kind of ask yourselves and maybe take it to your administrators if you're not an admin and say, okay, do you have structures in your school itself created by the admin team in your daily timetable or within the building itself that do support a positive atmosphere for this assessment and reassessment? All right, so that's kind of the foundation of how we got to where we are at Notre Dame, is that we now have structures in place. All right, and the next one is, how can you help having an open dialogue to effectively perform reassessment? All right, another question I want you to think about is, how can you or your admin convince, all right, your staff that if done right, and it's very scary at first, how can you actually know that it's not a lot of extra work? Because with all the work that I've done, it actually isn't. All right, there's a lot of legwork to get started, but now where we're at, it actually isn't a lot of work. And how can reassessment be used to affect, all right, a positive change in behaviors and promote a growth mindset? So those four main questions I'd like you to have and keep in the back of your mind. Okay. So the next slide is just a quick slide. I'm not going to get into the research. Normally when I do this presentation, I have two wonderful other gentlemen that help me, and they're the experts on this. I'd like to think they are, on a fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And in math, we see a lot of kids with a fixed mindset. They come to us, and you might have this in your situation, in your school, in any subject, but I can't get math. I can't do math. What am I going to do? And so on. How can we break that down? How can we stop that and have kids start to transition towards a growth mindset? And my hope is actually to use assessment, not all the time, but sometime, to help promote this growth mindset. Okay, so it's kind of twofold. This growth mindset is always there in this presentation. How can we bring it back to help growth mindset and help in the assessment as well? So this is a document here from our assessment guidelines document. It's sent out to all teachers. There's the role of the teacher, role of the parent, role of the student. I'm just showing you just one slide and highlight some of the key points here. All right, so obviously teachers plan and develop assessments, and then they're going to collect in the top right corner there the assessment information. Then they assess the evidence of performance, all right, that these students have done. all right? They interpret the results, all right? And then they communicate that, all right? So every teacher should be doing some form of this kind of circular loop right now. What I feel this is missing, though, in this loop is for teachers to have and reflect, all right, on their own assessments, all right? I think that's important, to then decide whether or not their delivery or their lessons were actually effective, all right? That assessments isn't just for the students anymore. Assessments should be for the teachers, right, as well, to see how effective they are in teaching. And if they didn't do a good job, maybe they have to reassess themselves and look at, well, how can I do this better? My first year teaching at Lethbridge, in Lethbridge, I was teaching a Math 20 applied course, and I was so new to the whole thing. And I teach a Math 20 applied quadratics unit, and I had a class average of 23% on this unit exam, and I'm freaking out because, like, I want to get hired again. And I went to my vice principal. I said, well, what do I do? And she just said, reteach it. It happens. All right. You have to reassess how you taught it and maybe do a better job next time. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Right. So I had to do some self-reflection there. And I've learned a lot since then. Right. That was one of my biggest failures as a teacher, but I think I learned quite a bit from it. So I want to push, and I've been trying to push within my department. We have a school that's about 1,850 kids. I have 11 teachers in my department, and I'm the department head there. And I'm really trying to push my teachers on, you know, you do have to self-reflect and see how well you did, and you can use those assessments for that. So the effective feedback loop here, this is incredibly important. Again, I'm not an expert on this. This was created by Randy Smith, this slide, but it was written part by Dylan William and Grant Wiggins. But you have to have a trusting relationship, and that's one of the things that we're pushing is first establish a relationship with the student, some way, somehow, and then once you have that relationship, you know, it should be goal oriented, and then you can then start to understand the existing knowledge that the student has, all right, and then you can start to move forward with, you know, actionable goals, timely goals, and keep this ongoing. And you should just ask your students and talk to your students, right? And that's the number one thing I'll focus on later on, is just having that discussion with the students, okay? So this is all somewhat more of the theoretically stuff. Sorry, I'm a math teacher, you can tell. So ask yourself for your assessments, all right, whether they're formative or summative, is does that provide does that elicit a productive response? Can you go and identify what's next? Is it targeted to learners, all right, to each specific learner as well? And does it focus on their strengths? And then can it cause thinking, all right? So those are the 5 questions for effective feedback from Tom Schimmer that I try to incorporate as well. Okay, so that's kind of keeping those pieces of information in mind. I'm going to go through our journey here at Notre Dame and where we failed, all right, where we still have work to go and grow, but it's just, how did we get to where we are? So a few years ago, we asked ourselves, or 20 years ago, you know, is reassessment such a thing? Is it even possible? And we're like, no, come on now, right? That's just too much work. It's too much of a hassle. And these kids, they better get it right the first time. Why are we giving all these kids second chances? Well, we're starting to be more into a second chance society. And there was a statement said to me that just, you know, kind of gave me another aha moment. If a kid fails their driver's license, we don't say, no, you just can't ever drive again, right? You again go practice more, and then you take the driver's test again, and then you keep doing that until you eventually succeed. And then we can say, yeah, you can drive. So why aren't we doing that in schools, right? Now, it's not as easy as that where kids just pay their $30 to take that test and keep going at it and going at it. So how can that work in schools? That's what we started thinking, and especially in my high school with math. So back in the day, we had, okay, well, let's start with like an attendance incentive, right? Where if you have less than 3 absences, we allow students to reassess one unit exam. Again, where we failed there was it's not timely. We weren't really giving students any feedback because what we used was at the end of the year summative exam or just the practice final that we gave them. So maybe in one unit they really struggled, and then we're making them do an entire unit exam, or sorry, final exam to replace one unit. They weren't locked in, they weren't proper or the same curricular outcomes. So, well, we did that for about 13 years at our school, all right? And then we thought we'd get cute at Notre Dame, and a lot of schools in our district were doing that. Oh, you can replace one unit exam with your final exam or practice exam. And we thought we'd get cute at Notre Dame, and we said, okay, well, we'll let you do 2, right? All the kids would be so happy they can replace 2. But again, all right, that's not actually reassessing those specific outcomes, all right, that they did perform poorly on. So it wasn't teaching them anything. It wasn't getting into the pit and helping them. It was just easy for us as teachers to say, yeah, we'll deal with that at the end of the year. All right. And what you do in your final exam, I'll help you out there. Some stuff some of the other schools were doing here in our district was they're allowing students to omit the final exam if they have had an average greater than 85% or some arbitrary number. And that was going on for quite some time as well. And then we started to think, well, what's wrong with that? And there's a lot of things wrong with what's on this page. And we thought, well, why are we only rewarding those high-end achievers when there could have been a kid who started with a 55 and busted their butt to get to a 70? They sure should deserve to have the final omitted as well. So picking arbitrary numbers, making kids jump through hoops to get to those numbers possibly, that wasn't good either. Another thing that we found with the attendance incentive was kids were showing up sick, right? They wanted to gain that attendance incentive, and so they're coming to school sick. Obviously in this time it wouldn't work, but back in the day it did, and they would just pass on their sickness to somebody else. So there's lots of issues that we found with this, but we did this for quite some time. And I'm looking back at it, I'm like, what were we thinking? What were we doing? So then in the year 2014-15, that school year, it was commissioned by Alberta Education to create some guidelines, these deliverable artifacts for principals, tools, some video supporting assessment, all right, titled Principles of Assessment. And there is the link. It should still be active. I haven't actually accessed it for quite some time, but that is where this all started, because I was asked to be on this committee for the district. And so we created, all right, the district guidelines, the assessment guidelines, and published them in 2016, 2017. I'm only going to be looking at one aspect of these guidelines, and that's specific to reassessment, and then how we changed our way of thinking towards it over the last 5 years. So the first 15 years that I taught, we didn't do a good job of reassessment and maybe even our assessment. The last 5 years, we've been working really hard, and I think we've grown ourselves as a math department at my school, but also our school. And that's what I'm going to focus on now. So this jumped out at me in that document for us, and I'll give you a chance to read that while I read it. So much about assessment is rooted in teacher professional judgment. Teacher judgment is improved through conversations about assessment and continued learning through resources such as Alberta Assessment Consortium website and Tom Schimmer's book. The last part of that wasn't that groundbreaking for me. It was our professional judgment on whether we can decide if a student has actually met those objectives and those standards to move on. And if teachers start to take and use their own professional judgment in terms of assessment, reassessment, and not be scared about me saying to a student, you do not know how to do this, or you do, all right, and we can move on from that then and also fix errors. So it's my judgment, and when my principal said, use your professional judgment, and he trusted me to do that, that's when I started to really look at things a little differently, say, okay, if I can use my judgment, what unique things could I do for assessment and reassessment? So when I brought it back to my department, this is around 2016, there's still a lot of hesitation. A lot of my teachers were scared, worried about the extra work that was going to come with reassessment. They thought, oh, every kid's going to want to reassess everything, right? There's going to be so much extra work. So to calm their nerves, I thought I would get creative and cute and make this form that you can see there for kids to have to fill out along with their parents. And what I tried to do was incorporate a feedback loop. So I wanted the parents involved, the teacher involved, and the student involved. And I wanted the student to identify the reasons why they did poorly on the exam or assessment. This was just a huge barrier. No kid actually, not many kids actually took us up on this. And it made my teachers feel at ease first, because, okay, now it's like jump through this hoop, so then you can have reassessment. And within 2 months, we scrapped this whole thing. It wasn't working. Kids weren't asking, and those that were, it was just too many hoops to jump through, because we just found out there is a quicker and easier way. So we got rid of our form. I think there's still some schools in my district that still use it. I would recommend they don't. And this is all leading up to this very important, in my mind, scale. So up to this point, we were proud to say as a department, hey, we offer reassessment. We could come back to parents, teachers, our principal, our downtown, say, yeah, we do offer reassessment, but we were fooling ourselves, because we were actually on the left side of that continuum, of that scale. All right, we didn't say never, but it was only one form of assessment. It was fixed deadline. All right, it was basically teacher directed only. And I thought, okay, well, over time, maybe we might move more to the right. We didn't move there fast enough. And so we're still going at this too slow, because we want to get to the right side where it's a flexible deadline and it's negotiated between the teacher and student. And in that negotiation and discussion, that's when some real learning can happen and affecting change for that growth mindset. So we did have that reassessment. We decided to then go and say, okay, we're going to have completely alternate exams. All right, it's still a reassessment, but it's basically just having them rewrite an entire exam. Sorry if you hear my dog barking. It's just off to the side. I hope you don't hear it. So all we did was, okay, you jump through hoops for us, you ask for reassessment, and now here's just a whole new, same length of exam for you to write. And again, how effective was that? For some kids, it was actually, because they needed to go back and start from scratch in the unit. For a lot of kids, it wasn't. So then we decided, all right, well, sorry, before we get to that, then we had a new administrator come in May of 2017, and he created a new timetable. And he was really trying to push the high school redesign for us. And he created this testing center, which some schools currently have, some schools don't, but it was ran outside the normal classroom times, all right, but also throughout the day, all right? So throughout the day for kids who happen to have spares, or if teachers need to use that space, they can send a kid down to the actual assessment center. It's run by a teacher's aide. Our principal cashed in their hours and then was able to have this aide perform 35 hours a week in this room. And we're going to get some more feedback from that teacher's aide on our assessment center a little bit later. But they also became or created tutorial times, which we call Pride at our school. and it became more accessible to teachers and students. It was more built into the timetable. And so once that happened, then teachers started to feel a lot more comfortable with the concept of reassessment. Because now we start to have some structures in place that support us. It wasn't the teacher staying after school at the end of the day and sitting there watching 3 kids rewrite that test, all right? They're not losing time. That test can be written during certain parts of the day, and the teacher had just more time. So I was talking to my admin, and Mr. Durante, Frank Durante, this is one of the quotes that he tries to work by, and he shared it with me, and we're not sure exactly who wrote this lady, Rachel Lair. I don't know her. She might have written it, or she's just passing it on. But this really tied in where instructional leadership is not about improving teachers, all right? It's about creating the conditions where teachers can improve themselves, all right? It's not about being an expert. It's cultivating the expertise in your school and creating a culture of collaboration. So then the following year, Mr. Durante included an embedded PD time for us. And they created a timetable, all right, that allowed us to explore the assessment and reassessment a lot deeper. So they carved time out of the support time for students. So students were in class less and gave that back to teachers. And with that, that was huge. That's what I believe high school redesign is all about, is if we can make teachers happier and more at ease and more comfortable and give them time, because it's time, especially now with the quarter schedule, if you're teaching a high school, it's that important and that crucial. So we started to have embedded PD, all right, EPD, and tutorial and pride time throughout the day. So with all of those supports that we had, we decided to, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So they created those supports, to provide reassessment again, but it's still at the teacher's discretion and their judgment. So I still had a lot of teachers concerned, especially diploma teachers, because if I do reassessment, they're thinking, what about that mark discrepancy, right? They're so scared from years past where people would get upset if you're too far apart from the diploma average and your in-school average. So I had a lot of fears to calm when we started to really jump in with both feet into this process. So here's our assessment center hours currently on a quarter system. You just want to have a peek at that. So it runs from 7:30 to 3:30 every day, with some short breaks for our admin, or not admin, so for the instructional assistant that is running it. And it's accessible at all times in those hours, all right? And we're currently on a quarter system. Normally we are a semestered system, and we would then run it from 7:30 probably till about 4:30 on a normal semestered system. So now we have all these supports that we've created, all right, thanks to admin. These are some of the highlights that the assessment center actually can come up with, and what she says. So it's supervised, it's caring, it's respectful, it is quiet. And this is important. Many teachers are allowed to use it as an extension of the classroom. For students who need to just complete assessments on their spare time or during class time, it's all depending on what the teacher wants and whatnot. But it allows students to assess or reassess without missing the next class or writing it in the hallway where it might not be as secure. All right, so if there's field trips or illnesses, team sports, etc., it really allowed a lot more flexibility, having that built-in time and that built-in room in our school. So multiple periods, like I said, to assess even before and after school or during regular school. All right, students with a personal learning period or a spare. All right, or students during a class. So between September, this is last year, 16th of 2019 and March 13th of 2020, right before the COVID shutdown, we had in our school 2,367 individual students show up to this assessment center. And that could be for a reassessment or just an assessment or some for an assignment, right? It's just a quiet place where kids can work. It was very well taken advantage of, and it still currently is. Okay, there's some issues with it. Just, I don't want to say how awesome it is. It can be difficult to manage, all right, because we could have a large amount of students show up, or students with LSPs that need extra time. So that's where teachers have to maybe just chunk assignments and so on. And because it's being used so much, we actually need a way bigger space for it to run really effectively. We're almost at the point where we need 2 teacher assistants in there running this rather than the one, but she's doing an absolutely fantastic job. All right, so with the embedded PD and the assessment center, my department decided to make short little mini assessments rather than taking an entire unit exam, just a single page, all right, front and back, 12 marks, all right, not the normal 20 marks or 30 marks, just getting to the heart of the matter. And so we shortened these reassessment mini exams down quite a bit, all right. I wanted to also talk about what really helped us as well in starting off is we shared assessments with another high school. So we gave them our unit exams and our quizzes, and they gave us theirs. We keep them secure, but right away, instantly, we had a second set of exams in case students needed to redo an entire exam. But we found that that wasn't working well for every student, so we decided to make shorter mini assessments that covered the main curricular outcomes. All right, we offered these at the end of the year or any time throughout the year. So rather than having that large, big practice exam at the end of the year, students would then identify, all right, which units they struggled with most, and they would do that in preparation or right before their exam. But then we thought, well, that doesn't work for everybody, because what about that kid who has a 95% average? And do we need to make them rewrite an entire exam or even our little mini assessment? Is there other ways for them? So that's where we want to get into in this flow chart, in this scale, multiple methods of reassessment. And this was the toughest thing for me to convince my department to be able to do. And that's such as a verbal reassessment or on-the-spot reassessment. Or could they not just write a paragraph or a short paragraph or a little mini essay, if you want to call it that, on where they went wrong, and is that valid? And absolutely it is, because I'm coming back to that, we get to use our professional judgment on whether the student has actually achieved those outcomes or not. So once I got all of those structures in place to make my department feel better, okay, we got rid of the form for them to fill out, but we had a second set of exams or multiple sets of exams for students to write. They were blueprinted, they're valid. We then came up with the little mini ones as well. So it's a lot of work at the start, a lot of work, but there was 11 of us, and that was the nice thing. We could each take a little bit here and there. I don't know how you do this in a small school. That's the challenge.
Staff.
Sorry? Somebody was asking a question? Okay, I heard somebody ask a question there, I apologize. And so now we have our mini assessments, and we also have the structures to support it within the school and the support from admin. We can really start to get creative now and move from the left side of that scale more to the right side. So now we invite students, and I encourage people in my school, and I encourage you, invite students to come and do a reassessment, because when that happens, all right, it creates a discussion. And from that discussion, rather than have them fill it in a form, you can have a one-on-one, whether it's during the class time or in a tutorial time. All right. What is the actual issue that is slowing the student down, that is not letting them perform to what they want to perform? And that's where you can really jump in the pit with the student and see. And the first thing I ask, if a student comes to me and says, I'd like a reassessment, is, can you show me, have you done all of your work? And if they haven't, we got to start right there. Well, you need to do more practice, all right? If that's not the situation, then what specifically are you not understanding? And come and see me in my tutorial schedule, and we'll work at it together, all right? And then if multiple kids come to me with the same question, well, then that's on me. Maybe I got to reflect and reassess how I delivered it, and maybe I have to reteach that, or look at it from a different perspective. But kids now at our school come to us and ask for reassessment, and the first thing it's a great now opportunity for us to say, all right, what were the issues? Maybe it was, all right, he had a hockey game the night before, or a football game, or they had a band concert, and they just didn't have time to study. And that's valid in my mind, because these kids lead very, very busy lives. And so in that situation, maybe they were just tired. Maybe they didn't have time to study, so we can set an alternative date. They still did write the exam for us, all right? But maybe, okay, you still deserve to have a second chance, all right? And that's part of that second chance culture. So we're now getting to more flexible deadlines, all right? It's still somewhat teacher directed, all right? What else can we do? Well, we still have our mini assessments, we have our full scale exams, but now I'm starting to try more unique stuff. And this is just two examples of two students this year. I know I probably can't read the left one. It's really messy. The right one is a little faint, but these were students who got 95 on an exam. They asked for a reassessment. I'm not going to make them redo the entire exam. I just said, can you write me a short little clip on why you got it wrong and what you need to look out for in the future so you don't get that same question wrong again? So for those 95% students, we can still do that. Some kids, on the spot, after I hand back the exams, they'll look at their exams. They come up and they talk to me. Oh, Mr. Sproul, I can't believe I did this, this, and this. I look at them. Well, what should you have done? And they tell me right there on the spot. I would then give them marks. All right. That seems maybe out there, but I believe in my professional judgment. If they can adequately show to me that they know the concepts and perform it, all right, it might be after the fact, but they do know it. I also start to give marks on multiple choice and numeric response, even though they got the question wrong. So I'm going to give part marks. They might get on a grade 12 math question, might be 10 steps long. If they can do 5, 6, 7 of those steps, but they forgot to write a negative sign, but they showed me, geez, they really did know what they were doing, they would come to me and say, look what I did, I just forgot a negative. Okay, well, you know what, I'm going to give you a half a mark or maybe even a full mark there. And again, I'm using my professional judgment. That sort of process now is starting to create trust, and my department is starting to do that, and that's creating a trust with the student and the teacher, and the student is starting to feel that we're jumping in there with them, all right? And it's no longer just us being, teacher directed, it's just our way or the highway. And that's a very linear way of thinking. If, that's the way we thought 20 years ago. And we need to start working on maybe make it more of a ring or a circular way of thinking, where we can use these reassessments to help foster that growth mindset by showing that we care, we have that relationship, and we're trying to figure out what's wrong so that we can fix it. And then you get the buy-in from the kids, and they start to think that they can do it. So it can affect change in behaviors or diagnose issues and gaps that students have in their learning. But it also is good for teachers to understand the effectiveness of their lessons and their deliveries. And it does provide that dialogue between the learner and the teacher. And I think that's incredibly important. And from that dialogue, that's where issues get addressed. And that's where we can really start to model and show that growth mindset. So who's really benefiting from this reassessment and the assessment that we're trying at our school? I think everybody does, including us teachers, if we show up with a certain mindset. And with that, as long as you're open, it takes a lot of work at the start. I'm not going to lie to you there. We worked our butts off to create all of those second set, third set, and mini assessments. But once we had that within my department of 11, my teachers became a lot more comfortable, and at least they had that to fall back on. And once that was created, then they started to explore other areas of doing the reassessment, the verbal. I had a teacher who was dead set against reassessment, just didn't like the idea, didn't like the concept, because she didn't get reassessment when she was in high school. And well, a lot of us didn't. And once we created the safe structures for the teachers to feel more comfortable, she is now doing verbal reassessments when she teaches her AP 30-1s. She's okay with taking a kid's mark and having it at 100 overall, or a 99 or 98, because they genuinely worked hard to get to there. They're making silly mistakes, but they're adequately being able to show, all right, to the teacher what they do, what they know, and what they don't know, or sorry, what they know. So we got to approach assessment on finding out what kids know rather than trying to find out what kids don't know. So in my mind, my belief is that everyone benefits, and specifically that the teacher can benefit and become a better teacher. So I'm just going to finish off with this slide from Jim Carrey's Dumb and Dumber. He was told that he gets a 1 in about a million chance of dating this girl, and he got extremely happy about it. So you're telling me that there's a chance, and that's important for kids to know, that there's always a chance to get out of a hole that they may have dug. I remember back in university, I would bomb the first unit exam for one of my courses, and I'm like, well, there goes this course. I might as well take the withdrawal if I can. And I don't want kids feeling that. I want them to feel that they have a chance to, make up for errors that they made and recognize their errors, and that all hope is not lost. Because that first unit exam, if a kid does poorly on it, they'll be like, well, there goes this class. And that's something that I'm trying not to have. And I just saw a comment there that it's the hope. You're right. I don't know who said that, but there's a hope element that's incredibly important. And how you can get that to happen by just being open to a reassessment. Like, assessment is pretty standard, right? Everybody's doing some form, all right, but open to that reassessment where it can diagnose and cause change. So I'm going to turn it back over to Louise, I think. Is that who I turned it over to? Or are we going to have some questions and answers? And I have some scenarios, but I'm not going to do these. So I'm just going to exit out of this and go back to the very first screen. We won't be able to do these scenarios right now. Okay, so Louise?
Well, I think whoops.
Wow, I went on long. I went for a long time. I didn't realize the time. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't know. I see Debbie was in there with a comment about comments about your staff and knowing the why that they're doing these practices to support learning. And I see Randy had a positive comment in there for you. Are there any questions from anyone that's out there? I don't know if it's easiest to go into chat, or Ken, is there an easier way for them to pose questions to Patrick?
I think at this point, if you have a question and you don't feel like typing, you can just open your mic up. You have permission to do that, and you can go ahead and ask a question. I think that works too. Or you can put something in the chat if that's right. That's what you want to do.
And I'm sure Patrick's good at wait time. He's a great teacher. Okay, resource there, a good book to read, Grading Smarter, Not Harder. Okay, there's a question.
So the mini assessments, it doesn't take a full you know, for high school 80-minute block, it doesn't take that at all. They're more of a 25 to 30-minute. And we originally intended them to be done at the end of the year after we're done teaching all curriculum. Usually you give yourself 4 to 5 days before the final. And we decided, rather than us being up at the board reteaching the entire unit, we would allow kids to reassess, you know, 2 or 3 particular units. And that would be then on them to go and identify which units they did worst on, and then focus on that, and not focus on the units you did awesome on, because you already know that, and just study for that. And so we'd have, every kid would take advantage of it, and there'd be different units going on throughout the those 4 or 5 days. We color coded them to limit cheating, and we made them do it in the order that the units appeared. So we said, you can't sit beside anybody with a green test if you're writing a green test. It was just a quick visual for us. And then so you had to do unit 2 before you wrote unit 6. So then we're trying to limit kids getting the answers and sharing that with their friends if they happen to write the same one. And so that was the intent for the mini assessments. It still covered all the unit outcomes. And then we decided, why are we saving these for the end of the year? Why can't they be used throughout the year in our assessment center? And so we opened it up for that. Last year in COVID, we opened up some of them to be done online. And so we put those into Brightspace or our D2L, and we were able to use that. So it kept our main exams secure, because we know during COVID, there could have been some sharing of materials between the students. So we did open those up. So we're going to have to touch those up a little bit.
Okay, there's a couple more questions here.
Okay, the reluctant learners, thanks, Ken. The reluctant learners, I actually reach out to them first and invite them in, come see me if they can, during our tutorial time. But if not, during class, let's go in the hallway and talk. And that's where I say, why haven't you asked me for reassessment? And usually I learn a lot about the student. They're maybe just shy, or they don't want to put in the effort, and that's fine too. But that's when I can really start to coach them and help them. So the reluctant ones, the reluctant learners, I invite them. It sounds weird. It's like I'm creating more work for myself and for my department, because I want them to do it too. But since we have everything already kind of in place, the structure and support to get it ready, it turns out not to be a lot of work. Okay, thoughts on all departments assessing the same, one teacher the same. So I'm not sure I understand that question. Thoughts on all department assessing the same. We do use common exams. We do keep them secured. So we currently have, back last year, we would have about 20 total sections of, let's say, a Math 20-1, 10 in each semester. We would have multiple versions of one exam with numbers changed and so on. Does one teacher, yes, I have some teachers that don't do verbal. They're not comfortable, and that's fine. I can't force them to, because they'll get there hopefully eventually, but the minimum is that they are doing some reassessment, and they'll eventually get there hopefully with the verbal reassessment. And as a department head, I have to model that more for them, and make sure that they understand that they can do that. So that's the tough one, is having all my department members do it. I'm at about 80% of my department doing some form of verbal reassessment. How are my school's marks holding up? Very well. I actually took that slide out. I don't know if Helmut Kaiser is still on or not, but he does a lot of statistical analysis. He's the director of instructional services for our district, and he's been doing a statistical analysis for our my school in particular. And in our previous presentation with him, pretty much the same one as this, I didn't want to put it in there because I didn't want to sound like I'm bragging, but we have an upward trend, and that's both within school and with our diploma marks. So there is a gap in schools higher than diploma, but it's roughly the same discrepancy. And I was at first scared of that because we're going to have an upward trend of just in school, and our diploma might say stagnant. And if done right, the reassessment, if it's done right, then it will pay off, and they will be parallel lines. And I don't know if Helmut's still here. You might want to speak to that. I'm not sure. Some students don't prepare for some assessments. Okay, I actually haven't been finding that, surprisingly, because the first thing I always ask them is, what have you done originally for the first assessment? They know that question's coming. And so I have this one kid, Jordan. We've done 3 unit exams in Math 30-1 this year. After each unit exam, I put the grades in online, and I get an email right after, Mr. Sproul, can I do a reassessment? So I invite him, sure, come talk to me first. He does show up, and I say, well, what was the problem? And, well, I didn't do all my homework. Well, that's where you start. And so he hasn't actually come back and followed through, and so I got to chase him down, and I don't want to do too much. I don't want to hold his hand too much. So I'm like, he's that tough one where he's not doing his homework. I know he's not doing the homework, and he's not preparing. And then immediately after asking for a reassessment, well, I have the right to say no. I absolutely do. And in my professional judgment, I would say no to this boy until he earns it. And so it's not a right that every kid gets it. And one thing I didn't say is at the start of every class, I always tell my class, the way I reassess one kid will look entirely different than I reassess another kid in here. And that's all based on individuals. And they get that. They understand that. And I have not had an issue. But you did this for Johnny and you did this for Susie. Why don't you do it for me? I haven't had that because we usually have that discussion first, trying to figure out what went wrong. Okay, the quarter system has been, this is our first time going to a quarter system, and it's been really, really tough on not only the teachers, but the students as well. I'm about, if I were to estimate comparing this year to last year, we're still getting quite a few kids asking for reassessment. It's just, a lot of kids are just not finding time to be able to do it. And so it is quite a bit less. And so we still try to provide those opportunities in the mornings and after school. So I have some kids though that are currently in like a Math 30-1 and an English 30, and they're pooped at the end of the day. They just go home and they need to crash for a little bit. So it's either early in the morning or we try to sneak time in. Like if I can't get the assessment center, maybe if the kid deserves it, I'll let them write something during lunch. It all depends, right? So they know I'm there for them, but there comes a time where you just got to focus on what you're currently learning and maybe save the reassessments till the end of the year. The thing for us is with the quarter in high school, the English diploma exam is on November 2nd. The math diploma is November 6th. So because pretty much half my class or more are going to be gone writing diplomas, those that aren't, I'm going to let them save reassessments to the end of the year if they need to. So we have 4 days prior to the actual math diploma. Then, so if kids can't write it ongoing throughout the quarter, they can do it at the end of the quarter right before the diploma. And so we're going to carve out time there for them. So we're trying to finish curriculum. We were told we're given 40 days, but in reality, we're given 33 days because of diplomas and the day of our diploma being on November 6th. So we're really rushing fast. So it has been tough. It's been really tough.
I think you covered off all the questions there, Patrick. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just appreciate everything that you have to say, and I hope my granddaughters end up with a math teacher like you as they move down.
Thank you.
You move up from grade 1 up and that sort of thing. So I think this has been great, and once again, kudos to you and what your school's been doing, and it continues to be a growth process for everyone. And I just think the students that are involved in this, it's just bonus for them.
You bet.
So,
You'll share my email. I'm perfectly open to anybody contacting me directly if they don't want to ask a question now, if they want to reach out to me anytime. So if you want, Louise, you can share my email to anybody who has signed up. Okay.
okay, I'll try and get that to Nancy. She may have already sent things out, but
Okay.
if you make sure it's on your present, no, we've already got it saved. Was it in your presentation at all?
I didn't. That's my
drop
fault.
it in
I
the
should
chat,
have
Patrick?
done that. Sorry.
Can you just type it in the chat? They can grab it
Sure.
from there.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
right, we're still recording. So if you put that in there, and once that's in there, then
Mhm.
people can head home. I don't know, last week we had someone, their 13-year-old child was driving as they Zoomed in the car on the way home from work, and but people can now head home, and that's great. And I think, are the francophones, Eric, are you working with people? Do you want to invite them? Eric's not there?
I think Eric's looking after 2 sessions at once here, but he said he was going to hang around and work with the Francophone teachers that were able to stay and do a little visiting afterwards. So
Okay, sounds
I'm
good.
going to stop the recording now. If you've got Patrick's
Emails there?
email, it's first name dot last name at cssd.ab.ca. So pretty easy to remember.
Thanks a lot, people.
Thank
Say
you. Thank you guys. Thanks, Louise.